All right, so Australia. They are dealing with a lot of mandates right now. So whether you're pro or anti-vaccine, doesn't really matter. Um, it's alarming. So I'm gonna throw out another frizzy-haired, no makeup video. So Richard A. Patterson wrote Australia's Stonehenge. Australia is the primary, if not only, but at least primary location of zircons, which are the oldest mineral on the face of the planet, and how we know the Earth's age is the Earth is at least that old, which is, I think, about 4 billion years. And one of our oldest relatives that we've been able to trace through mDNA, or mitochondrial DNA, is the Denisovans, who were a smallish in stature, mainly cave-dwelling people. They hunted what look like, basically, I think they've been nicknamed pygmy elephants or something. A relative of the mammoths. They hunted and ate them, and we can tell that because we found, anthropologists found at least one hearth, but I believe several, with charred bones that belong to a mini mammoth species. And you can also see cut marks and things on people's food. I don't know if they found them on those. It was like 10 years ago that I read about this. But Denisovans, we can track matrilineally these other people. So a lot of people will talk about, especially with 23andMe and things, Neanderthal DNA, which are a, Germanic people. But Denisovans were Australian, or rather, they lived there. There was definitely some very heavy colonization as well. I believe primarily from England, but I'm sure it was others. So I don't know what all went on there with the Aboriginal peoples. I know a lot of repression, genocide, rape, all the classic things. I don't know too many historical facts about it. But it went on. So, India, Africa. Speaking of a continent as a country isn't the greatest, but Europe, between Belgium, England, honestly, I think those are the two main ones. France was a little bit better about it because they used mythology to justify it, which actually has some basis. Just like, Nazi esoterica had some basis. But it's still terrible. It's still genocide. Still don't do it. But those, I guess, are the main three. That basically, yeah, so pretty much all of Africa. And the spice trade and everything. So pretty much everything that happened with that happened with Australia, as far as I know. I wanted to throw out there, just for the sake of symbology, the elephants, which are relatives of the mammoth, were also relatives of the little dudes running around on Australia. Same way Denisovans were small relatives of ours in the past, which is cool. Elephants are important in India, which is perhaps the most significant symbolic reference of feminine energy. Hathor, or Ninhursag, or Hera, had a huge cult following, on and off. India's pretty strong with the feminine, And we can track these through mDNA, so, which is solely matrilineal, so I thought that was significant. I don't think it has any physical basis, but it's kind of cool. And then I wanted to talk, okay, so they used to call Australia in Ireland. So England took over, well, the potato famine was not an accident. And I'll probably do a different, I'll cover potatoes in South America and things in another video, but I'm sorry, I'm a little bit disorganized this evening. I'm just trying to get this information out there and see what people think. Throw it back, you know? Anyway, England took pretty much all Irish land, and in Scotland, people didn't want to leave, so they enacted the Highland Clearances, which is where they drove people out, forcibly relocated them. Some to America, some to England, some to mainland Europe, depending on what their category and location were. And basically, they would give people notice and tell them to go to the port, whatever their closest port was, and they were shipped off, literally. And that was to make more room for the sheep that England was farming there, because wool was producing more money than the peasants that they had driven into such bad poverty that in a few of the sources that I read, this is super depressing, fair warning, some families who would get cholera or tuberculosis, or just they were malnourished, they would board up their house with their dogs and pigs inside to suffocate themselves, because they literally had no food. And they entombed themselves in their houses. And that was mainly in Ireland. Anyway. So, some people would commit crimes, especially women, because women, during these times, this is mainly 1840s to 50s and on, they could be sent to workhouses, which were like pre-industrial revolution level, terrible, terrible working conditions. It was basically slave labor. They would house you and feed you, and you would produce whatever. A lot of them were wool mills and flax mills, which is so the reason for the name spinster is that's an unmarried woman over the age of 25 who spins for a living. So I'm officially a spinster. Well, I don't spin for a living, but so women could be shipped off to be domestic servants or work in workhouses. And they especially liked, domestic positions because they were slightly less terrible than other, So when people say that Irish people were slaves too, yes, but not chattel slavery. That's just a whole new level of human rights violations. So anyway, speaking of which, so Van Diemen's Land is what it was called. It was a prison colony where they would ship Irish criminals. And so some people, especially women, if they couldn't get work and get shipped off, they would commit crimes to be sent to prisons because it was better than life, which is terrible. A lot of men would go do agricultural work or mine gold. There are a lot of Irish ballads in America from the 1840s and 50s. And before and after. But that's the main area that there was this mass exodus. And so Van Diemen's Land is what they called Australia, which was basically used as a prison colony. Obviously, there were specific locations, but it was designed because it was, it was used because it's on the opposite side of the world. You have to have a boat. Even if you have a boat, how are you going to sail without a crew? Like, you cannot get away. So, yeah. Those are the main things. I will save my points on Persephone and Isis rituals and things for another time. That's more mystical. I want to know what people think about the DNA factor. So, haplogroups. mDNA, which is going to be important in my work later on stuff I've been working on since. Doesn't matter. Haplogroups are important. mDNA is important. So I'm throwing it out there. I don't want to start an argument. I seriously, I need to know more about Australia. It's really cool location with unique DNA. Denisovan DNA is all over the world, but it came from there. And zircons. So zircons are roughly 4 billion years old. And so we know the Earth is that old because of the minerals that are, some are above ground in Australia, which is really cool. So, yeah, just throwing that out there. And there's a Stonehenge site. Again, Australia's Stonehenge by Richard A. Patterson. Yeah. It's a good reminder for me to go buy that book. Because if I buy it, I'll probably read it. Yeah, I think that's everything. I feel like I should, wisely tie everything together, but those are just a few points. So please tell me what you think.